Alright, going to be recording another league here. This time I'm going to be playing Mono Blue Merfolk. And just advance warning, I haven't played this in a little while. I think the last time I played this was that last published 5-0 result. I do like the deck, but honestly, I haven't only been winning with it. Some of the leagues before that 5-0 didn't go as well as I would have liked, but I never typically do that bad at worst with this deck. I do like Merfolk. I've always liked it pretty much ever since I've played the archetype. I really just like the way it is. It can be both aggressive, but it can also be controlling. And you know, who doesn't like counter spells? Yeah, but here, for this specific version that I'm going to be playing, I'm going to be jamming the Chalice of the Void version again. And the reason why is very simple. Prowess decks of all various kinds are all over the place. And, you know, and it's not maybe just Prowess. I do see Boggles sometimes too, although admittedly it's not that huge. Otherwise, I'd be having much worse results with the Prowess deck that I also play than I do. But I just find that the format is kind of becoming a little more lean, so to speak. Except, of course, there's also a lot of Uro decks floating around too. But the main reason I'm playing Chalice of the Void is just that actually I find that it's not necessarily as much the decks like Uro that we have as much of a problem with. It's a lot of these leaner decks like Prowess in particular. And Chalice of the Void basically takes matchups that otherwise are pretty bad. Sometimes they almost feel unwinnable. And it flips them over and makes them basically good matchups. So I like Chalice because, you know, it just shores up a lot of problems that the deck has. Unfortunately, though, it's not always good in every matchup. And so a lot of times when I play Chalice of the Void, I am at least thinking of playing Smuggler's Copter. And contrary to, I think, what some reputation I have suggests, I actually have not played Smuggler's Copter with Chalice as the norm. I would say Smuggler's Copter is actually not one of the most common cards I play, but generally I have enjoyed playing it when I have. In the past, the problem with Smuggler's Copter, though, was that it tended to get shut off by Stony Silence, believe it or not. That was the biggest problem that I had with playing Smuggler's Copter, because the blue-white control decks, which were very common a while ago, you know, quite a while ago, but, you know, back when I used to be playing it, or back when I experimented with it at first, those blue-white control decks almost always had Stony Silence in their sideboard because of how common Affinity was back then. And it just felt kind of bad having to board out so many cards against that matchup. And of course, that wasn't the only matchup that would bring in Stony Silence. And also, Ancient Grudge was all over the place too, I remember, for a while. And it just felt, yeah, like Smuggler's Copter kind of got tagged with a lot of very powerful sideboard hate cards. And the good news is I just don't feel like that is as much of an issue nowadays like it was back then. Of course, Kolaghan's Command is still running around, and there still is some incentive to play it. And of course, a Braid is a new card since I think the last time I was really dabbling with Smuggler's Copter until more relatively recently. That being said, though, Kolaghan's Command, I think the power of Kolaghan's Command versus the artifacts we play is a little bit overrated. The reality is Kolaghan's Command is going to be a 2-for-1 almost no matter what. And the good news is we do have counter magic like Deprive and Force of Negation in the sideboard. But you know, the main thing that keeps Kolaghan's Command from being too backbreaking is just that it is 3 mana. And we do have a lot of ways to gain card advantage, and a lot of times the decks that play it play multiple colors, and as such, Spreading Seas oftentimes is pretty good in those matchups. Maybe not necessarily all of them, but I find that Kolaghan's Command doesn't necessarily make this deck unplayable. And personally, I found that Kolaghan's Command doesn't necessarily make any particular artifacts we play that much, if really much at all, worse than Kolaghan's Command would be no matter what. Basically, deal 2, discard a card is always basically going to be live. Deal 2, return a creature. You know, the other modes are, I mean, particularly anytime Kolaghan's Command is able to kill most of the creatures a deck plays with the 2 damage function, it's almost always going to be live anyway, and that's certainly the case with this deck. Yeah, so we'll see how this goes. I do like Smuggler's Copter, together with Chalice specifically, because it enables me to pitch Chalice if it's not good, and of course Chalice in multiples is not very good, particularly because I'm not playing Cavern of Souls, and the main reason why is just that I really like playing at least 4 utility lands that give me game later in the game. Here, those utility lands are going to be Castle Vantress. Before this, I was experimenting with some mixture of Horizon lands, Fairy Conclave, different types of lands. I did very much like Fairy Conclave back a while ago. I think I played that quite a bit, probably more than almost any other Merfolk player has played the card. I don't even know if anybody else really did play it much until maybe some people started seeing some of my deck lists. But I personally have found Castle Vantress to be to offer most of what Fairy Conclave offered, which was more, game later in the game without having to take more damage off of my lands. But it doesn't have the same downside, because most of the time it's not coming into play tapped. It will come into play tapped sometimes, but most of the time, even when it does, just like with Fairy Conclave back when I played that, it's not actually that backbreaking. It might be kind of surprising, but it's not as backbreaking as you might think. This deck is really more of a mid-range deck rather than an aggro deck, believe it or not. It can be aggressive, but it really doesn't win most of the time until turns 5 or 6, as I think many other Merfolk players have commented as well. But yeah, I really like Castle Ventress because this gives the deck a lot of late game inevitability. Usually doesn't come on board until quite a bit later in the game, but when it does, this almost single-handedly gives us the edge in a lot of very late game scenarios against a lot of other decks, control, mid-range, you name it. The only downside is it usually doesn't become quite valuable until quite late, because it's usually pretty hard, even when you get to 5 mana, to justify just using the ability and not doing anything else. That being said, I do think that, and I have been experimenting doing this more often than people might think. It may actually be correct to just use the ability, even if you can do something else, because the ability to scry 2 is actually quite powerful. And anytime you put a card to the bottom that's useless, the value is actually, quite high. It's almost like drawing another card if you put dead cards to the bottom. I'm not playing Force of Negation in the main. That might be wrong. I think it's pretty close between playing Dismember in the main or Force of Negation. Unfortunately, I don't think I can do both. I tried playing without Spreading Seas in the main. I just really like the card for turning on Island Walk, and even though decks are not quite as vulnerable to mana hate like this as they were in the past, for a number of reasons like Ren and 6, I still find that I am able to win a not completely insignificant amount of games by color screwing the opponent. And of course, the Island Walk for the Lord is just very, very, very strong. And blue is not omnipresent like it is in Legacy. So when I cut it, I just almost always, almost always missed it. It's just very hard for me to justify cutting it. And of course, I could cut Brazen Borrower. That's the only other, I think, candidate that might be able to be cut. And I just really, really like Brazen Borrower. I like having an out to main deck Ensnaring Bridge. I just like how it's able to clear the board for for a good attack. The evasion sometimes is good. Icefang Coatl seems to be quite a bit less common than back when Astrolabe was still in the format. So most of the time, a 3/1 flying creature is going to be actually pretty strong in my experience. It's also a bounce spell that doubles as a creature, which is also relevant because sometimes you really need to have another creature to crew Smuggler's Copter. There's just a lot for me to like about Brazen Borrow. I've really, really liked it, actually, particularly in this build with Smuggler's Copter and Chalice. Also because I would say it's particularly powerful in a Chalice version, because you can bounce one-drop creatures and even one-drop enchantments and artifacts like Hardened Scales or Amulet of Vigor, for example. And under Chalice, that's almost like a hard removal spell. That's also why I'm playing Harbinger of the Tides instead of Merfolk Trickster. They're both pretty good, but Harbinger of the Tides I find is just a lot more powerful if you're playing Chalice main deck, being able to bounce Goblin Guides, Swift Spears, you name it, and basically remove them from the game if you've got a Chalice in play is pretty strong. I think 4 deprives, 4 Force Negation is pretty mandatory, whether they're in the sideboard or main. I think 8 of these is is really one of the whole reasons to be playing Merfolk in the first place. In my personal opinion, I'm sure some people might and probably do disagree with me, but I just feel like one of the main draws to playing the Merfolk archetype is that it's one of the few decks that can actually leverage Deprive, which is basically the closest thing to a counterspell in Modern, and to the spell counterspell. And it's just really powerful, being able to counter anything they do any time of the game, and it basically never comes back unless it's Uro or something recursive like that. Which thankfully, if it's graveyard-based recursion, we've got Relic of Progenitus. Yeah, just I wouldn't leave home without all 4 deprives. Maybe sometimes if there's a particularly other strong SB options, maybe 3. I've sometimes registered 3. I've never liked it. I've always missed having all 4. Definitely 4 Force Negation is a necessary evil a lot of times with decks like Neobrand running around. Also, it's just the deck is just kind of clunky without basically any 1-drops other than the pseudo 1-drop in Dismember and Aether Vial. So having spells that are under 2 or even free like Force Negation really enables you to not fall behind, which is one argument to maybe even play it in the main. The problem is I'm just not sure what else to cut, and I find that Dismember is just very, very good right now. Personally, I could see myself playing Force Negation back in the main instead of Dismember, though. It's just I hate losing to things like Devoted Druid. I like having an answer to things like Thought-Knot Seer, Reality Smasher. There's just a lot. There's a lot of creatures that it just feels bad to not have a clean answer in game 1. And Brazen Borrower, and Brazen Borrower is of course good temporarily, but when you've got combo piece type cards in particular, a lot of which are creatures nowadays, this number is just very very nice. Relic is pretty self-explanatory, just like with the mono red Obosh deck that I recently recorded. Relic is basically just the best option of Graveyard Hate you can play if you're not affected by Graveyard Hate yourself, and if you're not in white, because honestly I think the only Graveyard Hate card that is arguably stronger than Relic is Rest in Peace. But even then, there is something to like about Relic even more than Rest in Peace, because it does replace itself, and you can pretty comfortably jam all 4 in your sideboard and not have to really worry much about getting into trouble, because they do work quite well in multiples, both because they also clear the graveyard better in conjunction with each other, but also any additional unnecessary copies can easily be cycled. And Aether Gust is just so many prowess decks again, just a little extra help there. Titan decks, this can prevent Titan from coming down for a turn, even if they've got a Cavern of Souls. That's very nice. It's entirely possible another card might be better in this slot, but hey, we are living in the era of powerful red and green creatures, and Aether Gust is just pretty good at handling those threats. And of course, Veil of Summer too, which is also another nice thing about Chalice. Yep, so let's see how this goes. I am actually going to be... I'm still planning to record 1 video at a time for now. I want to hear from anybody who would prefer that I do them all in 1 video. But I actually personally would prefer very much to do these in individual videos, because you know, personally, I've liked watching them more as individual videos from other content creators, particularly Nikachu. I just really liked the way they were broken up. I liked the way you could see the matchups ahead of time, so you kind of know what to expect. Gives you a better frame of reference when you're looking at the plays. Of course, you know, you're looking at it in hindsight, but still, you know, I like that. But you know, more than anything, like right now, I'm probably not going to be able to play all five league matches, and you know, I just feel the urge to play a game, and I figure, hey, why not record it? And you know, that's just not quite an option I'm going to have if I you know, if I record it all at once. You know, I suppose I could edit a bunch of individual videos together, but actually, believe it or not, I don't have video editing software yet. I'm just using a very basic video capture software right now. Maybe in the future I'll get more advanced, but right now I feel the urge to play, you know, maybe a game or two. We'll see how it goes, and thought, why not record? So let's see how this goes.